The fifth step is mind-body coordination. Mind-body coordination is based on the understanding that our body and our mind are inseparably one. And they're both expressions of our consciousness. Okay, the body is a field of molecules. The mind is a field of energy and information. And both fields are expressions of our consciousness. When we experience our consciousness subjectively, we call it the mind. When we experience our consciousness objectively, we call it the body. So they are actually the same thing. And in a healthy person, they are integrated, totally integrated. So a healthy person has poise and grace and movement and feels athletic and feels energetic because the mind and body are perfectly coordinated, like a great athlete, like a great ballet dancer, like a great yogi or a Tai Chi master.
We tend to think that the mind and the body are separate, but actually they're inextricably interwoven. That every time we have a thought in the mind, it generates a shift in the chemical or physiological pattern of the body, and every time we change our body, it has an effect on our mind. And so we think that the ancient techniques of yoga and Tai Chi can be seen as ways to enhance that connection between mind and body. And so by being aware of how your position affects your mental state and aware how your mental state affects your position, you can more consciously use the benefits of these ancient traditions to awaken mind-body well-being and reverse the biological aging process.
How do we integrate the experience of mind and body? The first thing is that if you have a doubt about, who should I listen to, my body or my mind? Then listen to your body. Your mind sometimes can be fooled into what we call rationality. And rationality can sometimes be dangerous because it thinks in linear cause-effect relationships. It thinks it knows, and yet the knowledge that we gain through our rational mind gets outdated very quickly. On the other hand, your body is not rational, it's not linear, it's contextual. It means it takes everything into account. Your body is contextual, it's holistic, it's nurturing, it doesn't have a win-lose orientation, all the things, the problems that our ego or our mind has. Your body doesn't have those problems. It's contextual, it's holistic, it's nurturing, it doesn't have a win-lose orientation, and it goes beyond cause-effect relationships to see what's the deeper need here. So when you're in doubt, listen to your body.
It's not uncommon for me, just while I'm talking to somebody, a stressed executive who's telling me that they had a heart attack 6 months ago and they took it easy for a little while, but now they're back in the rat race and they're worried that they're going to have another problem, for them to be talking like a machine gun, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and all I'll say to them is, let me stop you right here. Just take a deep breath for me. No. And they'll have the memory right at that moment of, wow, I haven't even been breathing. And so, it takes some reminder when you're finding yourself caught up in that non-stop thinking process. Often what happens is people start to breathe more and more shallow. And what happens is that you activate the sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system. As neurologists, we divide the nervous system into two parts, voluntary and involuntary. The voluntary is, waving your hand and moving your legs and speaking. The involuntary, which is also called autonomic, like automatic, controls things like blood pressure, heart rate, temperature, digestive function. And we used to think that it was completely involuntary, that we couldn't affect it in any way. But now we know that actually through certain techniques like meditation, like yoga, like breathing, we can actually influence that involuntary nervous system. And one of the most powerful ways of doing it is just consciously breathing. So we know now that there's something called heart rate variability, which is the normal fluctuation of the heart rate. And when a person is healthy, their heart rate actually speeds up and slows down a little bit with every breath. But as you get more and more stressed, the heart rate doesn't have that variability, and that's actually a predictor for an early heart attack. By learning to breathe slowly and deeply, it actually restores that heart rate variability, lowers the blood pressure, and actually reduces the risk for early heart attacks. So just paying attention to breathing, just reminding yourself to take a deep breath, particularly when you're stressful, when you're in a stressful situation, or when you're waiting for something that you can't do anything about. So I actually teach people the elevator breath, which is when you're waiting for an elevator, there's nothing you can do except wait at that point. So instead of being anxious about how long it's taking, use that as an opportunity to just do some deep breathing. And what people actually find is when they do that, instead of being anxious when waiting for the elevator, when the elevator comes, they're actually a little bit disappointed that now they have to get into the elevator because they've been enjoying that brief relaxation moment. So again, it doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to start integrating these techniques into your life, and then you'll see the benefits right away from them. So right now, people listening should just take a deep breath and notice how by just taking a little time to breathe deeply, their whole system quiets down.
Your mind is saying, I have this deadline, I have to work hard and stay up all night to finish this project, and your body is saying, I'm tired, I want to sleep. Listen to your body. And then the next day, you'll be able to do that project much better. Okay? Your mind is saying, I want to go see that movie tonight, and your body is saying, I want to sleep tonight. Listen to your body. Your body is saying, I'm full, and your mind is saying, I'm going to have that dessert. Listen to your body. So start to practice body awareness. What we call intuition is nothing but a heightened sense of body awareness. Your body is eavesdropping on all the intelligence of the universe. And intuitive people are very tuned into the finest sensations of feeling in their body. There are other things that you can do to enhance the integration of your body and mind. Okay, and these things include yoga. The word yoga itself means union. Union of what? Union of your body and your mind and your soul as a continuum of your consciousness. So yoga is one wonderful way of integrating the mind and the body.
What I would say to viewers right now is freeze exactly where you are and then bring your attention into your body and see if there's some place in your body right now that feels tense or uncomfortable. And then just make some little move or adjustment. So it might just be, shifting in your seat a little bit or stretching a little bit. And by just making that little move, then once again bring your attention into your body and notice if you feel any better. And if you notice it, you've just done yoga. That's all yoga means. Yoga just means using your mind to pay attention to your body, using your body to get more comfortable, and then noticing how it affects your mind. And so all these ancient techniques are just taking advantage of that simple principle, that our minds can affect our body and our bodies can affect our mind. And particularly these days where people are so sedentary, sitting on airplanes for several hours at a time, or sitting at their desk, or sitting in traffic for so long, the body gets very rigid. And the consequence of that is there's stagnation of energy and circulation, and then that starts to affect the mind. You feel anxious, or you feel stressed, or you feel tired when it seems like you shouldn't. And by just being aware of that and stretching and moving consciously, that energy is freed up and people's mental state also changes. So, we have a whole program for yoga, 7 Spiritual Laws of Yoga, which is based upon those principles, but it doesn't have to be complicated. You just have to simply become aware of your body, tune into it, ask your body, am I holding stress somewhere? Move until you feel a little bit better, and then notice how that releases energy. And that's really the essence of yoga. It's the essence of Tai Chi. It's the essence of Qigong. It's the essence of all these ancient exercise techniques.
There are 3 breathing techniques that you can do. One is a breathing technique that's called Bhastrika, that increases your body's metabolism. And this is by moving the diaphragm rapidly and actually breathing through rapid movements of the diaphragm. It's like a bellows breath, and when you practice it, you increase your metabolism, sometimes even more than you can increase through intense exercise. Then there's another breath that is actually called balancing breath. It's alternate nostril breathing. And there's another breath that increases your physical endurance. It's called Ujjayi breathing. That involves the back of your throat and involves movement of your diaphragm itself. And if you practice these 3 breathing techniques, the bellows breath to increase your metabolism, the alternate nostril breathing to balance the two hemispheres of your brain, and the ujjayi breath to increase your endurance, you'll be increasing your mind-body coordination.
The breath is one of those very few aspects of the human physiology that happens completely by itself if we're not paying attention to it, and then we can affect it very directly when we do pay attention to it. So it crosses the line between involuntary and voluntary nervous system activity. So the breath is very closely associated with the mind. When you're agitated, when your mind is agitated, your breath reflects that. And when your mind is quiet, your breath reflects that. So the ancient wisdom traditions often use the breath as healing technologies. So we know that there are physiological changes associated with breaths that are activating or quieting or soothing. And by people practicing those just for a few minutes every day, they can actually change the way they're feeling and reverse their biological markers of aging. There's a classical technique called Bhastrika, which basically means that you breathe quickly through your nose in and out. So it looks like this. And if you do that 10 times in a row and then close your eyes, you'll notice that there's more energy circulating. So at the beginning of the day, if you're feeling sluggish as you're getting out of bed, or you're feeling congested because you've been sitting still too long, if you just do that for about 10-15 seconds, it's mostly diaphragmatic breathing, then you'll notice automatically that by just changing your breathing pattern, your mental state changes. There's another breath called Sitali, which is breathing through an open mouth like this. And if you do that, you'll notice it has a cooling effect. So this is a breath that's recommended when you're just feeling really irritated or frustrated. So if you're stuck in rush hour traffic and you know your blood pressure is rising, you just do that slow, even breath for a few breaths, you'll find yourself not being so stressed. Then there's another breath which is called Nadi Shodhana, which is a very calming breath. And it's called alternate nostril breathing. So what you do is you separate your fingers like this, you put your thumb over one nostril and your other fingers over the other nostril, and then just very quietly you inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. If you do that quietly with your eyes half closed, it becomes a very meditative breath. So we recommend that people do that when they're highly stressed, when they're anxious, when they're having trouble falling asleep at night. So by just learning to regulate your breath, you can actually have an effect on your mind. And that way, instead of drinking a couple shots of vodka or taking a sleeping medicine, just by being consciously aware of your breath, you can have the physiological shifts associated with increasing balance in your body and your mind. At the top of the game, the difference between first place and fifth place is totally psychological. Be it golf or basketball or entertainment, it's just a mind game at that point. And, every one of them will tell you that when they're on, when their personal life is relatively calm and stable and they've been sleeping well and they're feeling powerful internally, that's when they hit the target. And if they're stressed or they're worrying about something or they're not sleeping well or they, fallen off their healthy diet, that little subtle difference is what makes which is really what determines whether or not they're successful or not successful. So the most successful people in the world that we see really recognize the value of these mind-body practices. It's not uncommon for someone to say, I don't have time to meditate. I saw, this retired man today who said, I don't just know if I can have time to meditate. And I tried to convince him that, presidents of countries and senior executives of major corporations, they find the time to meditate because they find that it creates time for themselves. So someone who's retired, you can fill up your life with a lot of busy stuff, but take a little time to create that mind-body integration, and you'll see that the rest of life is much more enjoyable. Plus, it's health promotion. It's disease prevention, rather than waiting until you get sick and then deciding that's the time to start taking better care of yourself. Start now, and then you'll be able to avoid some of these illnesses that are commonly associated with aging, but don't have to be. all the 10 steps to reverse aging, exercise has been consistently shown to produce the most rapid shifts. And so every day at the Chopra Center, I encourage people to get back into an exercise program. Everyone remembers a time when they were doing more and then they drift off, and then it's like there's a certain inertia that people think they want to start exercising. They know they should be exercising. They often say, I try to exercise. But really, exercise is just doing it. It's funny how often people develop these rituals where they join a gym but they never go, or they buy a piece of equipment and it sits in their basement. And so, what we encourage people to do and what we encourage the listeners to do is just start right now. Literally, as they're listening to me right now, get down on the floor and do some push-ups, or do a few sit-ups, or do a few knee bends. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's funny, people drive to their health fitness place and then they drive around for 10 minutes to find a parking place closer to the door. Whereas if they park 2 blocks away and walk, they'd already start their exercise program. So there's 3 components of a complete fitness process. One is flexibility. And in our experience, yoga is the best for that. The second is strength training. And actually, yoga can also be very good for that. There are a number of poses in yoga that really help you develop good muscle tone. And the third is cardiovascular. And yoga is really not ideally designed to increase cardiovascular fitness. You can do this set of sun salutations, this set of classical 12 postures briskly and get your heart rate up. But most people would benefit from doing some type of cardiovascular work. Again, it's great if you can spend time at the gym or go for a ride, but you can do it in your day's activity. Instead of parking as close to your office as you can, park as far away as you can in your parking lot and walk briskly. Instead of taking an elevator up 3 flights of stairs, run up 3 flights of stairs. Instead of getting in your car, driving 2 blocks for your lunch, walk briskly to your lunch. So it doesn't, it's only recently that we've made the whole thing so technological that people feel like they can't exercise in their day's life. But we encourage people to make your daily life exercise. Keep looking for opportunities to do a little bit more, to get your heart rate up a little bit, to breathe a little bit more deeply, to build up a little bit of sweat. And actually, recent studies have shown that several 5 to 10 minute sessions are equivalent to an extended 30-minute session. So it doesn't have to be all in a row, but then it becomes more part of your life rather than something separate from your life, and that's really where we see it having its greatest age-reversing benefits.
There are many studies that show that actually if you did nothing else but you practiced exercise regularly, you would affect all the biological markers of aging. And there are studies that have been done on people who are in their 90s. People who are in their late 90s or mid-90s, if they start to exercise, their biological markers start to reverse. People in their 80s. In some studies, the biological markers decrease quite a bit. So even if you exercise maybe 3 or 4 times a week for about half an hour, you would start to affect your biological markers. I recommend that you start with that, but then you increase it. And there are 3 kinds of exercises that we always must pay attention to. Exercise that improves our cardiovascular conditioning, exercise that increases our muscle strength, and exercise that increases our flexibility. So all these 3 things are really important. All of them affect the biological markers of aging, including lowering your cholesterol, raising your good cholesterol, improving your cardiovascular ability, including muscle strength, improving bone density. The 15 or so biomarkers of aging are all affected by regular exercise. You start with maybe half an hour 3 times a week, but then you gradually increase it because you'll find that you feel better. You feel better not only physically as your biomarkers start to reverse, you start to feel better emotionally. You start to feel better psychologically. Your sexual energy starts to increase. Your appetite is better. Everything improves. And exercise also raises opiates, endorphins, and oxytocin, and dopamine, and serotonin. It creates that internal symphony that produces that state of euphoria. And an internally generated state of euphoria is really the most important healing response you can think of. Because it's not just these things that are increasing, opiates and serotonin and dopamine and oxytocin. These things also are related to what are called immunomodulators. Immunomodulators are those chemicals in our body that modulate and increase the activity of our immune system. So an internally induced state of euphoria, as produced in exercise, doesn't just make you feel good. It does many things, not only on the biomarkers, but helping the activity of your immune system. I cannot emphasize how important exercise is as a method for reversing biological age.
There's this old song about in the year 2525, and so I don't know if you remember it, but it's a song where every millennium human beings were losing something else, so that by the end of the song, all we were brains in a test tube, basically. Because if we didn't use it, nature said, well, what's the point of keeping it? But the truth is that having vitality in your body is a very enjoyable experience. You know, having strength, having flexibility, having endurance, it makes life more fun. So build it into your life, and then you'll have it with you for your whole life. I mean, I know increasing numbers of people in their 80s who are more physically fit than a lot of people I know in their 40s and their 50s. Part is that they have the time to do it, but also they're noticing on a day-to-day basis that when they do their yoga and they do their exercise, that serves them the whole day. Their aches and pains, which they woke up with, disappear quickly. Their ability to stay alert throughout the day continues. Their digestion improves. And so it's just a matter of people doing it. And if you start doing it, you'll see the effects, and then it takes on a life of its own. You know, people don't have to be reminded to brush their teeth because it's been such a habituated pattern since they were children. You know, unfortunately these days, even in our schools, we're leaving out exercise programs, but people need to take that on in their own lives, and regardless of age, if they start doing it regularly, they'll see the benefits. I would actually recommend that you do something every day. I'd rather have people do 15 to 20 minutes 7 days a week than do an hour 3 days a week, because the problem that I see with 3 days a week is someone says, okay, I'm going to do it Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Well, Wednesday something comes up, and then they push it to Thursday. And then Thursday something comes up, and they say they're doing it on Friday, so now their 3 days a week is turned into 2 days a week. And then when you're not doing it regularly, there's that uncomfortable zone where your body got a little bit stiff because you've missed it for a few days, and then you're wondering, do I want to go through that again? So a little bit every day seems to bear more fruits than a more concentrated program. Now, clearly, if you have the time, then great. Do half an hour, 45 minutes, 4, 5, 6 days a week. But if you don't, then do 10 minutes every day, and you'll still have a benefit that will be noticeable.
The seventh step is getting rid of toxins from our body-mind system. So what are toxins? Toxins are things that are not good for our body. These days, the medical language that describes toxins, we call them free radicals. So, when we have a lot of stress, you make free radicals. When you take food that's not good for you, that's free radicals. When you have a toxic emotion, that generates free radicals in your body. You have a toxic relationship, that does the same thing, through stress, of course. So I would say, don't put toxins in your body. Whether they're toxins in your food, or they're toxins in your relationships, or they're toxic emotions, or toxic environments. They all create the same in your body. Accelerated aging as a result of toxic emotions, toxic relationships, toxic food, or substances, like cigarettes, too much alcohol, drugs, toxic substances, and also a toxic environment.
A broad definition of a toxin is an experience that you haven't completely metabolized at the time, and so you store some residue of it in your system. So on some level, if you're eating high-fat foods all the time, your body really isn't fully capable of metabolizing those saturated fats and that cholesterol, so you store it in your body, and ultimately it starts to block the circulation and cause heart attacks or strokes. if you're drinking too much alcohol, as a self-medication tool because you're stressed at night and you don't know how to shift your mind, so you wolf down a few glasses of wine or a couple martinis, then ultimately that toxicity starts to affect your physiology, and your liver stores that toxicity and it starts to impair your health. If you're smoking cigarettes, it may have a temporary benefit of relieving your stress, but again, the consequences of those chemicals ultimately get stored in your body. Your body is not able to eliminate them. It creates carcinogenic changes or accelerates your heart disease. So there are physical toxins. They can be in our food, they can be in our water, they can be in our air, they can be in the substances that we ingest. But for most people, the most toxic toxins are emotional toxins. They are experiences in relationships that we didn't completely metabolize. We harbor those feelings of resentment or hostility or disappointment or regret. And over time, that interferes with the ability to be fully present. So, I'm sure almost everyone can remember a time where they just had an argument with a loved one or a spouse or a boss, and they may decide they're going to go for a walk, and they could be walking in the most beautiful place in the world. They can be walking along the ocean or along a river, but their minds are still trying to digest this toxic experience, and they're completely unavailable or unable to enjoy what's happening in the present. So really, in some ways, a toxin can be thought of as something from the past that's interfering with your ability to be in the present. So we strongly encourage people to first identify what are you using that's toxic in your life right now and see what you can do to eliminate it. What can you do to release accumulated toxins, which could be something physical, like a physical detoxification, drinking herbal teas or fresh juices, or just going to a very healthy diet or doing more intensive detoxification programs. But most importantly, what can you do to eliminate toxic emotions in your life? And that usually means improving your communication skills, doing things to release the past, bringing forgiveness into your awareness, and just not carrying those regrets or resentments with you, because ultimately they translate into emotional and physical distress. In fact, there's actually good studies now to show that hostility is an independent risk factor for heart disease. That when you look at all the risk factors, you look at cigarette smoking and high blood pressure and high cholesterol and family history and inactivity and obesity and diabetes, it still doesn't account for some people who have heart attacks. And when you look at those people, it turns out that there's another factor, which is hostility, which means there's things going on in their life that they're harboring. There's a resentment. And that resentment ultimately translates into the chemistry that predisposes them to heart disease.
Toxic emotions. What are the most toxic emotions? They are things like anger and hostility. They are fear, anxiety, guilt, depression. These are the most toxic emotions that we can have. And they actually create physical toxicity. Think of it like this. As we go through life, we have two kinds of experiences. We have the experience of pleasure and we have the experience of pain. All experiences through contrast. If you don't have light, then you don't know what darkness is. If you don't have cold, you don't know what hot is. So pain and pleasure are like that. And in life, we navigate between the banks of pleasure and pain. That's not a problem if you keep flowing. It's when you get stuck on either side that there's a problem. You get stuck on the side of pain, we call that suffering. You get stuck on the side of pleasure, that's addiction. They're both dangerous. In order to keep your emotions healthy, what you need to do is follow a program where you're in touch with your emotions, where you can feel them, when you can identify them, where you can take responsibility for them, where you can release them, where you can share them, and where you can celebrate their release, you'll never gain any toxicity. Remembered pain is what we call anger. Anger is the memory of pain in the past that we didn't know how to deal with. The anticipation of pain in the future is anxiety. The redirection of pain at yourself is guilt. And the depletion of all the energy that happens as a result of this is depression. So anger, anxiety, guilt, and depression, the 4 toxic emotions, are actually the result of you not being in touch with your pain. How do we deal with pain? Here are the 7 steps. Number 1, responsibility. Take responsibility for your pain. If I say that my pain is because of something you did to me, then I have to wait till you change so I can feel better. I might be waiting for a long time. Okay. So responsibility says, it doesn't matter what caused the pain, I take responsibility. What is responsibility? It's the ability to respond creatively. That's my job. It's my pain, I have to take care of it. The first step. It's my pain, I have to take care of it. Second step, I have to feel the pain. Okay? How do I feel it? By feeling my body. Because every emotional experience has a counterpart in my body. Close your eyes right now. And think of a painful emotional experience that you might have had in the last 3 weeks. Some encounter that caused you to feel a little bit of emotional distress. If you can't think of something in the last 3 weeks, think of something in the last 3 months. And if you can't think of something in the last 3 months, then you might as well come up here and give the rest of this talk. Okay? So does anyone need to think of an experience, need more time? Everybody can think of something that happened in the last 3 or 4 months that caused them to feel a little distress. Now, as you think of that experience, start to feel your body. And see where you have a little sensation of discomfort. Imagine what happened. Think of what happened. See the images. Hear the conversation. Feel the feelings. And as you feel that, feel your body and see where you feel that discomfort. And then give it a word. What is it? Is it anger? Is it resentment? Is it fear or anxiety or guilt or sadness or depression? Don't use words that make you a victim. Don't say, I felt abandoned, I was abused, it was so-and-so's fault. Please don't use words like that reflect a sense of victimization. Use words that reflect a sense of responsibility. Okay, so give it a label. Now open your eyes. And would anyone tell me where they felt the sensation and what was the word they came up with? Anyone? Yes?
Anger in my shoulder and neck area.
Okay, so she felt anger and she felt some discomfort here. Okay? Anybody else?
Guilt.
Mm-hmm. She felt guilt and she felt it in the pit of her stomach. Anyone else?
Sadness.
Sadness, and she felt it in her heart. Most of you mentioned that the sensation was here or here. And somebody said it went here. Well, when it spills out of the basic chakras, this is where we usually experience fear, this is where we usually experience anger. When we can't express ourselves, the frustration is somewhere here, etc. When it starts to spill here and there and everywhere else, we've been denying it for a long time. Okay. So what did we do right now? We did 3 things. We took responsibility. Then we witnessed it. That's the second step. Then we labeled it. That's the third step. And we labeled it in a way that did not make us a victim. We didn't call the emotion felt abandoned or abused or let down or disappointed. Those are the first 3 steps. The fourth step is expressing the emotion. How do we express the emotion? By actually writing down what happened in a journal. There are studies that show that if you express your emotions through journaling, that helps your immune system. Now you express them in 3 ways. Express them from your point of view, then express them in the second person from the other person's point of view. Okay, that's called It's part of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is being in touch with my feelings, number one. Number two, trying to figure out what the other person felt, being in touch with other person's feelings, being in touch with other people's feelings. What do we call that? Empathy. And third is management of relationship. I'll come to that. But so you express your emotion to yourself in a journal from your point of view. Then you express the same emotion. What did the other person feel? I don't know what they feel, but I'll guess anyway when I write down. This is what they could have felt. And then express it from a third party's point of view. You're writing an article for the Wall Street Journal, and you're doing it very impartially. Subject A raised their volume of their voice and said, "Go to hell." And subject B made a fist and hit them in the face. Okay, that kind of thing. Totally impartial. And you'll find something very interesting. When you express your emotion in those ways and write it down, the emotion doesn't feel to have the same energy. It doesn't have the same charge. It starts to dissipate. So that's the fourth step. First step, responsibility. Second step, witnessing it by feeling the sensation. Third step, defining it, labeling it, anger, guilt, depression, sadness. Fourth step, expressing it. Okay? Fifth step, we share it. We share it with someone who's willing to listen. And that's someone who cares about us, someone who loves us. It doesn't have to be the person with whom we had the interaction. It could be. It can be anyone. All we want is for them to listen. We don't want their advice. We want them to listen. It's an amazing thing. When you express your emotion to yourself and then you share it with someone, the energy dissipates even more. So that's the fifth step. And then the sixth step is you release it. You do a ritual. You take that piece of paper where you wrote it all down and you play some music, you dance, and then you burn it and you let it go into the wind. And you say, gone, been there, done that. Okay, that's the sixth step. And then the seventh step is you celebrate. You open a bottle of champagne and you toast, or you go out, see a movie, go to a party and say, finished, celebrated. So those are the 7 steps. If you handle those 7 steps delicately, you will not accumulate toxic emotions in your body.
Our goal is to help people substitute behaviors that not only fulfill the need but have positive side effects for those behaviors that have negative side effects. And so there's technologies to try to make that transition. So for example, let's say someone is smoking cigarettes. Well, cigarettes fulfill a need for people. It's a stress reliever, it fulfills certain pharmacological needs in their brain, it gives them a break. And so if you take cigarettes away from someone and you don't replace it with something else, they may actually get worse rather than better. I can remember a case when I was a resident of a 90-year-old lady who smoked a pack a day. And of course, like every other doctor, I was riding her case and finally convinced her to stop smoking cigarettes. And 6 weeks later, she had a heart attack. And I realized that for her cigarettes were her friend. They gave her something to do. They were a ritual that reminded her of certain patterns which create safety for her. So you can't just take something away unless you replace it with something else. So when people are interested in eliminating toxins from their life, the first thing you have to do is identify what is it that's actually toxic. Then you want to ask the question, is there something else that you could do to replace that toxic behavior? And for almost everything there is. It could be meditation, it could be exercise, it could be substituting, healthy foods for toxic foods. It could be shifting to herbal teas for alcohol. It could be learning how to communicate in healthy ways rather than arguing in order to get the attention that you need. It could be creating balance so that you're not in a toxic job that's depleting you at every moment of your life. So we say, first become aware of what the toxicity is, then do something to eliminate it, then bring in something that's nourishing to replace it, and then support that whole process with a more holistic idea about what your life is about. Because ultimately, we believe that the purpose of life is to enjoy and to learn. And if you're doing something over and over again that isn't really bringing you fulfillment, then in the end, it's probably not going to have much benefit for you. You know, I take care of people at all stages of life, and I've yet to see someone on their deathbed tell me that their only regret is that they didn't go into work more often on the weekends. So, you know, it's important that people shift their perspective, going back to the first step, and say, why are you really here? You know, what's your purpose for being here? Is it to work 80 hours a week and to exhaust yourself and get high blood pressure and a heart attack? Or is it to actually have some enjoyment in your life? And if you give people permission, which I hope everybody listening is starting to give themselves permission, to ask themselves the question, what am I doing because I want to do it, and what am I doing because I feel that I have to do it? And if you can just start making some shifts to doing more of what you want to do as opposed to what you feel you have to do, you'll actually find that the things you have to do are easier to do. But at the end of the day, everybody should have something that they can say, that was great. It made life today worthwhile. And so that's the easiest way that we find to replace toxic behaviors with nourishing ones.
Toxic food we discussed, toxic substances we discussed, toxic emotions. Toxic environments come from toxic relationships. And toxic relationships, you know, handling relationship is a component of emotional intelligence. Remember, emotional intelligence is getting in touch with my own emotions, getting in touch with other people's emotions, and knowing how to handle relationships. Now, there's a brilliant psychologist. He's written a beautiful book called Nonviolent Communication. He says, always ask, his name is Marshall Rosenberg. And Dr. Rosenberg says, always ask yourself 4 questions. What am I observing? What am I feeling? What's the need? How do I fulfill the need? What is she observing? What is she feeling? What is she needing? How do I help her fulfill her need? So anytime we say observation, we're talking about observations, not evaluations or judgments. So when you say, my husband came home late and he was angry and upset, that's not an observation, that's an evaluation. Angry, upset, late. You say, my husband came home at 6 o'clock. He usually comes home at 5 o'clock. I asked him how he felt. He said, lousy. That's an observation. Try and make observations instead of judgments. Second thing is, when you make observations, you say, how do I feel as a result of that observation? And if you feel distress, then try and identify which of the 4 primary emotions it is of distress. Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is it fear? Is it guilt? Is it depression? 4 or 5 of these primary emotions. So then you say, okay, I felt that. Then that's what I felt. Second step. Third step is, so what's the need that I don't have at this moment? And the needs are either survival or safety is a basic need. A second need is achievement, material things. A third need is self-esteem. A fourth need is love and belongingness. A fifth need is higher guidance. A sixth need is creative expression. And finally, the need for spirituality. So those are the needs we have. Say, which need is missing here? And in the relationship, if the relationship is a loving one, you go through the whole exercise. This is what I felt, this is what I need. Would you help me fulfill my need? And if I feel distress in you, I start saying the same thing to you. What are you observing? What are you feeling? What do you need? How do I fulfill my need? Start to pay attention to managing relationship with emotional intelligence, and you don't accumulate toxicity in your body. Also, drink lots of water, by the way, because irrespective of what the toxins are, if you drink water, you'll be getting rid of toxins. Look at your tongue in the mirror and make sure it's pink and moist, like that of a puppy dog. Okay, and your breath is fresh, that means you have no toxicity in your body. If your breath is stale, if your tongue is coated and muddy, if you're yucky, then you have lots of toxins in the body. So that's our 7th step.
Eliminating toxins from life is a key component to reverse the aging process. release physical toxins, release emotional toxins, transform toxic relationships, and that will allow you to fully appreciate what's happening in your life right now and generate the chemistry that promotes health and slows and ultimately reverses the aging process.